Okay, we've come to episode 3, installment 3 of my Rolling Stones London Records deep dive. I'm really having a good time with this series. I hope you guys are too. Just to give you my background with the Rolling Stones, my dad was a huge Rolling Stones fan, particularly the Stones of the 60s, the Brian Jones era. The first album that I heard all the time around the house was the Hot Rocks compilation, which had all those early U.S. singles, all those great album tracks, and I've been a fan ever since. I've just there's something about that 60s music which has always resonated with me, that I've always appreciated. So to be able to do these episodes with these Rolling Stones album that some of them I had to go back and discover, because my dad only had like the greatest hits. He had like Between the Buttons, he had Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, some of those, and the rest I had just heard on the Hot Rocks compilation. But nonetheless, we are at the third installment, which means we are talking about the third U.S. album, the Rolling Stones Now! With an exclamation point, you have to say it, the Rolling Stones Now! Rolling Stones Now! Okay, anyway. So this was the third Rolling Stones album, and it was released in February of 1965, 1 month after the second UK album proper, which shared its cover with the US album 12 by 5. And so we got a brand new cover for the third album. This is one of my favorite early Rolling Stones covers. I love this collage of the 1964 era Stones, the black and white. Most of the Rolling Stones album covers back then were I just found them cooler than the Beatles covers. They just were. There was something a little bit darker and more mysterious. The Rolling Stones image was definitely kind of the polar opposite of the Beatles image. And so they definitely attracted sort of the more rebellious, people who were not totally into necessarily the Beatles image. I mean, you had Beatles fans who were also Rolling Stones fans, but the Rolling Stones just crafted, in large part due to Andrew Loog Oldham's influence, they just crafted sort of a meaner kind of a persona than the Beatles did. But nonetheless, this was the third album, and so since the Rolling Stones had issued their second album, 3 of those tracks appeared on the 12 by 5 album, and the remaining ones found their home on this compilation. So we're going to go through, talk about track by track, who wrote it, where did it originally appear, and just any other interesting information that we have. So for this album, like I say, most of it is comprised of material that originated on the Rolling Stones #2 UK album, starting off with the first three tracks. Everybody Needs Somebody to Love is the opening track. Now, that was written by Solomon and Burt Burns and Jerry Wexler. Solomon Burke released it as a single in July of 1964, and that appears on the Rolling Stones #2. The second track is Down Home Girl, written by Jerry Leiber and Artie Butler. Alvin Robinson charted with that back in August of 1964. And then the third track from Rolling Stones #2 to lead off this album is the Chuck Berry song, You Can't Catch Me. Chuck Berry released it as a single all the way back in December of 1955, but it was always a favorite of those British bands. And then track number 4 is Heart of Stone, which was released as a single in the US. The Rolling Stones have released Little Red Rooster in the UK, but London Records did not want to release that as the single, and so they were given Heart of Stone as a replacement. And so that was released in December of 1964 as a single. The next track was What a Shame, which was the B-side of the Heart of Stone single and another Jagger Richards original composition. What a Shame actually ended up on Rolling Stones #2. And then the last track on the first side is Mona, I Need You Baby, which was recorded by Bo Diddley, released as a single in 1957. And that was originally on the debut in the UK, just titled The Rolling Stones. So going over to side 2, we starts off with Down the Road a piece, which was written by Don Ray, and the Will Bradley Trio were the original group that recorded the song way back in August of 1940. Chuck Berry also recorded a version of the song, which is likely where the Rolling Stones heard it, and the version that they adapted for this song. This was on the Rolling Stones number 2. The second song on side 2 is Off the Hook, which is another Jagger Richards composition. It was the B-side of the UK single Little Red Rooster and also found a home on Rolling Stones number 2. The third Rolling Stones number 2 track that we get here is Pain in My Heart, which is the cover of an Otis Redding song from September of 1963. It was written by Naomi Neville, aka Alan Toussaint, and Otis Redding. The next track we have is Oh Baby, We Got a Good Thing Going, which was a Barbara Lynn Ozen song from 1964. That was not released in the UK at all. Little Red Rooster, again, that was the UK single in November of 1964, but it did not appear on an album in the UK. That was written by Willie Dixon and recorded by Howlin' Wolf in October of 1961. Rolling Stones, of course, were huge Howlin' Wolf fans.
Hold a second. Yeah, what I wanted to ask you, Nick, that Little Red Rooster, when you recorded it, where did you make it?
Howling Jack Good. What?
Now, I want a serious answer to this question.
No, in London.
Where? Oh, you can't say that.
No.
But then you make some of your records in America?
Yes.
Where? Here in Hollywood?
Yeah, and Chicago.
Well, I was in Chicago a little while ago, and I came across this restaurant. I went in, and I found a chap singing the blues. I thought he was fantastic, so I booked him. And it turned out to be somebody you know about. In fact, he's quite famous, isn't he?
Yes, well, he was the first one that recorded Little Red Rooster.
Was he? When did you... Tell us something about him, Brian.
Well, when we first started playing together, we started playing because we wanted to play rhythm and blues, and Howlin' Wolf was one of our greatest idols, and it's a great pleasure to find him booked on this show tonight. Really, it's a pleasure. Thanks for Howlin' Jack Good.
So I think it's about time you shut up and we had Howlin' Wolf on.
And then the final track that we get on this album is Surprise, Surprise, the final Jagger Richards composition that we get on this album, and it was not released in the UK. Now, one of the interesting things about this album when it was released is that very early pressings on the back cover contained this liner note by Andrew Loog Oldham, which was very quickly deleted. It was almost the liner note equivalent of the Butcher cover for the Beatles. And Andrew Loog Oldham, for some reason, thought that this would be acceptable, but that it played into the Rolling Stones' bad boy image. And this is what he wrote. This is the Stones' new disc within. Cast deep in your pockets for the loot to buy this disc of groovies and fancy words. If you don't have the bread, see that blind man, knock him on the head. Steal his wallet, and lo and behold, you have the loot. If you put in the boot, good, another one sold. I think Andrew Loog Oldham fancied himself a beat poet because a lot of these liner notes sounds like he's trying to be way too clever. He's trying to use all this hip lingo. But in this case, it failed miserably. They had to excise it from future liner notes. If you could find a copy that has that on it. It was also on the UK Rolling Stones number 2 liner notes. See if you can find either of those early pressings with that on it. Consider yourself very lucky, but you're probably going to have to pay handsomely for it. So anyway, what do I think of this album? This album for me is definitely a 10 out of 10. This is the first legitimately very solid Rolling Stones album. The R&B covers work. The blues covers work. They're very solid Rolling Stones original compositions from Jagger and Richards on here. My favorites on here, I love the cover of Down Home Girl. I think Heart of Stone is a very solid single, and I'm glad they put it on this album. I think the Mona, I Need You Baby, Bo Diddley cover works extremely well. I love Off the Hook. Pain in My Heart. I've always been an Otis Redding fan, so I love the cover of that. And I love Little Red Rooster. I love Howlin' Wolf, and I think the Rolling Stones do a spot-on cover. That slide guitar from Brian Jones works so well. So solid album. Definitely my favorite of the first 3 early Rolling Stones albums. Now, I have a mono copy of this, which is an immaculate collection. Immaculate condition. I had to pay almost $60 for this because it is in near mint shape. I will show you what this looks like. Ooh, look at the fancy. Look at this. Seriously, look at this fancy London sleeve. It's even got the poly lining in it, but that's what the mono looks like. It's got the FFT, the symbol of sound progress. My only Rolling Stones album that has that. This is my stereo version, still in the shrink. I had to pay handsomely for this as well, but it is in immaculate collection. It does not have the cool inner sleeve on it, but it is on the Blue London record label. So those are the prized possessions in my collection. I do not have it on cassette, and I do not have a little table here that I can readily grab my CDs. That's why I have to bend over and bend down and pick them up off the floor. But it's a nice sheepskin rug, so don't worry, they're not laying on the bare floor. But anyway, nonetheless, this is the original CD release, and you can tell because it's got that digitally remastered banner there in black and red, and then it just has the track listing on the back. When you open up the little booklet inside, it does have the original back cover, which the back cover on here, on the Rolling Stones UK, it just says number 2 right here, but the rest of the back cover looks identical to the Rolling Stones number 2. But in the CD booklet, they do have a reproduction of that. And then this is the SACD version. And one thing that you will notice, and on the 80s represses of the Rolling Stones Now, you can see it's very much a yellow. Rolling Stones Now is in I can't talk, in yellow lettering, but you'll notice the original vinyl pressings had it written in gold, and so on the SACD, they adopted the gold lettering for the Rolling Stones Now. You open it up, the disc itself, and I'm not crazy about how these discs look. They try to customize them, but I don't know. I mean, it's okay. They just took the photographs from the front cover and did it as like a circular collage. Not crazy about that. I would have rather they reproduced the London label, but whatever. And then again, they just took the photographs from the back cover here and tried to arrange them in a fancy little collage there, which I'm not sure works. I don't know why they couldn't have just reproduced the back cover. Is that too much to ask? But anyway, that is my Now collection. So anyway, I hope you've been enjoying these episodes. I've been trying to keep them to under 10 minutes just for, because I respect your time. I know you guys are busy, but nonetheless, that's my thoughts on the Rolling Stones Now, a little deep dive that we did. Let me know if you like this series. Stroke my ego. No, but anyway, next album that we're going to cover is Out of Our Heads. Take care, everybody.